Released a year and a half after Resident Evil 2 on the 22nd of September 1999, 1 year after The Undertaker threw Mankind off Hell in a Cell, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis often gets overlooked by fans as it was released right at the end of the PS1's life cycle and less than 6 months before Code Veronica. RE3 never got the fair shake it deserved, given some of what it brought to the series. In this video, we're going to explore what RE3 did for Resident Evil as a series, and most importantly, what needs to remain, be expanded upon, or left by the wayside when Capcom finally releases a remake. This is James for First Aid Spray, and this is what we want to see, Remake 3. Story. The story of RE3 is the final gasp of a dying city, and the desperation felt as Umbrella seeks to cover up any evidence of their wrongdoings, eliminating any threats that might know the whole story of what happened in Raccoon City. The game has an iconic opening cutscene that still holds up to this day, and Jill Valentine's somewhat uneasy alliance with the UBCS in order to survive is still striking. We can only hope that given the more cinematic nature of gaming as a hobby now, that Capcom will be able to easily build upon their own groundwork. Its compelling drama and constant tension are perfect for the new style of game Capcom seems to be interested in from what we've seen in Remake 2. So what do we want to see in a Remake 3? The branching path system made RE3 the first and only game in the series to give players a choice in how the game unfolded. Do you fight the monster who just killed your friends, or retreat into the safety of the RPD? I think that today this system can not only help flesh out more of the story, but also give players a reason to play through the game multiple times, just to see how different choices might overlap and how it might change the possible various endings. In terms of characters, Remake 3 needs to explore more of the UBCS members, maybe even make them unlockable characters with different choices to make and offering a different perspective on the disaster around them. It'd be interesting to see something similar to the A-side and B-side elements from the original RE2 that were sadly lacking in the remake, but with characters like Carlos and Mikhail. It's easy to assume that Remake 3 will tie in events from Remake 2, and it absolutely should. When Leon and Claire are making their way through the police station, it's clear that something serious had happened. It'd be fantastic if one of the game's objectives would be to help Marvin and the last few RPD officers secure the police station. Maybe show us the fight we know happened in the second floor locker room. Maybe saving Jill was one of the reasons Marvin was injured, but chose not to mention this to a new recruit or a stranger in RE2. Marvin knows that Umbrella could be anyone. Whilst we're at it, Capcom should take this opportunity to fill in some of the events between the first game and this one. So much is implied, but it'd be nice to hear Jill's perspective and explore the cause of the trauma she's clearly suffering from during the game and her fight against Umbrella all this time. And finally, bring back the jump scares. Resident Evil is a series built on subverting an expectation of safety, whether it's dogs jumping through the east hallway in RE1 or the licker crashing through the window in RE2. Remake 3 needs to capitalize on the RE engine's ability to generate a tense atmosphere by really giving players some good scares. BOWs. As much as we love RE3, we have to say this is an area where the original game suffered a lot. The roster of monsters wasn't particularly strong, and new additions don't quite leave the same impact as previous entries. This brings me to my next question: how do we make it better? Firstly, don't cut any of the BOWs that we do have. An issue that Remake 2 had was the strange choice to not include its full roster of creatures. Make every monster count, turn the Drain Demos into something more striking, and give the Hunter Gamma a little bit more screen time. Spiders and crows absolutely need to make up for their Remake 2 absence. It certainly would make Remake 3 look better by comparison. Hell, why not include some creatures that we know are in the city but didn't actually cross Jill's path originally? RE2's Moth, or some of the underrated monsters from Resident Evil Outbreak. Raccoon City is a big place. Let's fill it with the nasty denizens that we know exist. And of course, give us more boss fights. Nemesis fights throughout the game are great and all, but to only have one other major threat to face, the Gravedigger, is not enough. There's a lot in the original that can be expanded to include a greater threat, or better yet, something original. Maybe there's something more sinister in the bowels of the hospital. Or one of the G-mutants crawled its way free of the sewers and is wreaking havoc. Whether you use the tools that are already there or create some new ones, it's your sandbox, Capcom. Fill it and I promise we'll all play it. The Nemesis. That's right, the Nemesis gets its own segment. With the game's namesake enemy, Capcom really reached for the stars with this guy. From the opening minutes of the game, we meet what might be our favourite enemy monster in Resident Evil history. The Nemesis was a relentless killer whose only objective was to hunt and kill you. Back in 1999, this guy was terrifying. His ability to seemingly appear at random meant that any hallway could lead to a fight, and you might not have the resources to win. This beast got stronger and found new equipment as the game progressed, proving that while you can get new weapons and more ammo, so could your biggest threat. He's going to need some changes in the next go around, especially with how Capcom massively implemented the Mr. X Tyrant in Remake 2. Nemesis should be clever. I think they need to really focus on what made him scary. He was smarter and faster than any other monster we'd seen in the series at that point, capable of sprinting down halls to catch up to you, and even being armed with a rocket launcher made him a threat even from all the way over the other end of that hallway you just wandered into. I think the next generation of Nemesis needs a bit more. I'd like to see him set traps, or maybe even use Brad or other survivors as bait to try and draw his target into an ambush. Let's also delve into his creation a bit more. The Nemesis is obviously a special case in terms of BOWs. We've not seen anything like him at that point in the series. It'd be interesting to learn more about his creation, how he was programmed. Most of the Nemesis lore didn't actually come from the game itself, and new fans should be able to learn the history of their new stalker. Finally, give him more weapons. As the game progresses, Nemesis gets a rocket launcher. I think that's a pretty significant jump to make. From nothing to rocket launcher, it'd be cool to see him escalate from melee weapons or maybe even a smaller gun to greater weapons as Jill and her allies prove much harder to kill than originally thought to be. Mechanics and mercenaries. The original RE3 gave us a couple of new mechanics. First, the ability to craft ammo for your weapons, something that really brought home the feeling of tension. Jill needing to scrounge around for gunpowder to craft ammunition for her weapons was an absolutely amazing experience, especially how she got better at doing it as she went on. Going to craft large amounts and then crafting improved bullets that did more damage, this was a feeling of accomplishment that doesn't appear in other RE games. Capcom, if you're listening, keep this mechanic, maybe even make it bigger. Let's see more crafting, and not just ammunition. Let's see medicines and bandages that stop status effects and bleeding. Raccoon City is a dangerous place. Use these mechanics to make it feel more dangerous. Unfortunately, the other new mechanic from RE3 Classic makes it so that you might not ever actually need to use that fancy new ammo. The game's dodge mechanic was an interesting experiment that enabled Jill to dodge out of harm's way if you triggered it at just the right time. In the end, the dodge mechanic fell flat, and whilst it was a fun experiment, we don't need it in Remake 3. Defensive items from Resident Evil 2002 were much better, but even those I don't think are really needed in a modern Resident Evil, as demonstrated in Remake 2. Lastly, I want to talk about the mercenaries mode. It all started with RE3, and needs to come full circle. One of our favourite additions in Resident Evil 3, it was a challenging but fun side game, giving us a reason to play for hours even after we had tied out the campaign. Capcom has done good by mercenaries in its ongoing iterations, and I have faith that they'll do right by it again. I trust you with this one, Capcom. Please don't hurt me again like you did with the Ghost Survivors in Remake 2. Make it arcadey. I want a leaderboard, and I want to be able to play with my friends. High hopes and deepest desires. We all have our wants and wishes for a good Resident Evil game, but what's something that can help this game be more than just another remake? How can Remake 3 make its own mark on the modern gaming landscape? For one thing, a more open, survival-orientated game. I mentioned earlier it would be cool to expand the crafting mechanics, and I believe that this could be such a key part of Remake 3 that it could change how the game feels. Quick crafting defensive weapons or med packs, using the scraps you can pick up off the shelves and from the trash bins around Raccoon City would make exploring the city a much different affair. In the meantime, give us multiple characters to play as, each with their own unique stats. Maybe Jill is faster and does have the unique ability to dodge enemies given her experience in dealing with the horrors of the first game. Perhaps Carlos has better recoil control when aiming down his weapon. Make Mikhail a defensive tank-like character, and Nikolai extra powerful with his knife. There's a lot to play with here, especially if we're playing a game that is more focused on survival. It's a long shot, but it would be great if Remake 3 tied in Resident Evil Outbreak content. Make the game multiplayer. Outbreak happens around the same time and has a diverse cast and multiple objective types. This is a pie-in-the-sky dream, but it'd be interesting to see a group needing to work together to fight through the death of Raccoon City, with Jill at the helm. There's a lot more I can mention and talk about in what would make Remake 3 a great game, and this is just a handful of the ideas on how Capcom can not only keep the feeling of the original, but make our step back in time to visit Raccoon City and have a unique, amazing experience. Let us know what you thought of this video, and what you'd most like to see out of Remake 3 in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with the podcast and all of our other content. I've been James for First Aid Spray. See you next... Huh?